This is Between Two Shovels, the Connector JPA's very first podcast, and we're here.
You know, the big thing is trying to, with these different funding agencies, is get them to understand really the value of the project, because we go in and we apply for whether it's 2 miles or 3 miles and we get some funding for it.
Well, the first thing I start with is like conviction, right? Have the courage of your conviction to say like, this is a good project and it's smartly planned and I'm making a reasonable request. What's stopping us from going all the way to Jackson? Funding. Give us the funding. We'll do it. Why did we target the Trade Corridor Enhancement program? What was some of the reasons, or what kind of inspired you to come here and work on this project?
Well, this is a project that's been going on for quite some time. It's literally kind of in my backyard, right? In the region that I live in, it's the biggest, I'd call it a mega project, right? And there aren't many of those around here.
Yeah.
So it's something as...
Yeah, well, this is Between Two Shovels, the Connector JPA's very first podcast, and we're here. I mean, this is the Connector JPA office. This has always been here, and we just set up a couple cameras and a couple lights and some microphones, and we're going to talk about our project. So I'm Derek Minnema. I'm the executive director of the Connector JPA, and this is Matt Lampa, and he's the principal civil engineer. And we're actually both civil engineers, and we've been working together for, I don't know, 10 years maybe? 7, 8, 9?
Consulting days, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. So, we're going to just kind of talk about our project and give some insights to the public about what we're working on and some of the challenges we're facing. All right. Well, it is March 2025. We had a really great 2024. I've been telling people we're doing more work now than ever before, right? I mean, we've got 9 miles of projects underway. We just kicked off a roundabout project at Granite Line in Wilton, working on a CEQA document there. We just had our board meeting in which we gave a pretty good update about some of the work that's going on. Matt, why don't you kind of tell everyone, I mean, what's keeping you super busy right now, and maybe spend some time highlighting what about Grant Line Road and what's going on with the project status on Grant Line Road?
Yeah, I feel like this work is really cyclical. Like when I came in, started here at the JPA 6.5 years ago, right? There was design, right-of-way acquisitions going on, environmental clearance going on for 3 different segments, right? The 2 in Elk Grove, Camera Road, Grant Line Road, and then White Rock and Folsom. And so everything was going hot and heavy. I remember coming in at that time, and the goal was to just get those projects to construction over the next, 2 years.
Yeah.
And so,
and I needed your help. My wife was pregnant at the time. So it was like, man, oh my God, I need some help here.
I didn't know what I was jumping into. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And, but yeah, so those projects eventually went to construction around 2020, 21, and finished in 2023, right? And so we spent the past few years finding money and, additional funding. And here we are, we find ourselves again in the midst of trying to get 3 different segments designed, starting right-of-way acquisitions, and then trying to get these things into construction over the next couple of years. So
yeah, history repeats. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been through it. I mean, I thought we would complete our last and final environmental document, but it seems like we're starting another one. Yeah, I mean, the nature of the work is to ramp up, right? Do some serious engineering work, do a lot of real estate acquisition, get these projects ready to build, and then we kind of pass it off, right, to the member agencies. And so, maybe that's something that people don't quite understand about the Connector JPA, is that there's 5 member agencies here, 2 counties and 3 cities. And, our job is not to build their projects for them. I think our job is to, advance and deliver the project and give it to them kind of on a silver platter. And then they need to go build it, right? We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of folks don't really understand, what the JPA is, right? And so I always got to spend a lot of time explaining it to them with, who our member agencies are and just the size of this agency. And so we're really geared to just work. We're I think we work pretty quick and nimble here on
Yeah.
having small staff and being able to utilize consultants to get things done. So um, you know, that is, the challenge of being a smaller agency. We have a lot of functions, right, that any public agency has, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Accounting, legal, personnel,
right,
below my pad. Still have to do all that.
we still have all the same functions, and we still need to figure out how to get all that done while advancing the project. So, that's
Yeah.
always a big challenge, but that's also kind of what makes it, you know, exciting and fun to come into work because you're just faced with all these things. It's a high paced environment, almost kind of like a consulting firm,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I've always kinda called this a little bit of like a startup, right?
Yeah.
We're like a little startup, agency here. But, you mentioned that, most people don't know a JPA, right? A Joint Powers Authority. And I've been doing some traveling, to the East Coast, and now I'm part of a trade organization that has conferences in different locations, and nobody knows what a JPA is, right? And when I describe the project that we're doing, we're building a 34-mile regional expressway. Why isn't the state DOT doing that?
Right.
Why isn't like, what do you mean you're doing that, right? And I have to kind of explain that, like, California is just different, it's just unique, and the reality is that, you know, the state DOT doesn't build projects like ours, right? It's kind of moved away from that over 50 years, it's not new,
Right.
and what happens, this is the way I try to explain it, is that, the need is there, right? When there's a project need, someone has to fill it. And if the state's not gonna do it, it falls down to the local agencies, and that's what we are, right? We've stepped up to fulfill the project need. The need and purpose of the project is to connect 4 highways, and in any other place, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, name it, Texas, if you're gonna connect 4 highways, a highway DOT is gonna do that. But here we are, and we're doing it, and, it's not for a county so much who is focusing on potholes, and a city's not set up to build a regional highway. And so we create a joint powers authority for a very specific purpose and a very specific mission, right?
Yeah. It's funny because everyone always asks me in the public, like, well, when's Caltrans gonna lay down the pavement? When's Caltrans gonna do it? And it turns into a lengthy discussion of why Caltrans isn't doing it, and then their eyes end up rolling back in their head.
Right.
All right, they're glossed over.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of nuances to, this project and this agency and how it's gonna get done and constructed, so,
I would love to see it be a state route. I mean, honestly, it's
yeah.
like it's almost like an amalgamation of state routes, right? We had the 65 East Side Freeway that got canceled, and 143 got canceled, all these kind of things, and these things happened in the mid 70s. Fast forward 50 years, and we're building the project that was always on the plans, right? It was always shown as a planning regional beltway. And I'd like to see it a state route, but I don't know if that'll ever happen.
Yeah, it should honestly, it should have a state route designation at some
Yeah.
point, right? Because we're talking 34-mile
Yeah.
expressway. This is, like, the biggest project, transportation project in the region,
Right.
right?
Yeah, well, if you
So,
go over to Livermore, it's like State Route 87's like this, right? I
yeah.
think it's very almost identical. So my wife thinks it should be, State Route 55 because we're connecting 50 to 5. And I was like, "You know what, Megan? That's brilliant." I will actually, it's actually sounds better than the Capital Southeast Connector. Let's just call it Route 55. So,
Yeah, when I tell people it's Capital Southeast Connector and no one knows what that is,
right.
I'm like, "Oh, that's that expressway that connects, I-5 to 50. Oh, that road."
Right. You know what? You give me a couple $100 million, I'll call it whatever the heck you wanna call it. It's yours, Caltrans. You can have it for a couple 100 million. It's environmentally approved. You can have it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about, some of the work that we're doing in, Folsom, right? So this is really our first expressway project that is out, built. For years, I described this as like our, what's that? Proof of concept,
Mhm.
right? Kind of like that Silicon Valley term, proof of concept. The day was never going to come where we were going to build all 34 miles at once, right? And we couldn't really tell people what the project was gonna look like because it doesn't exist around here, right? We're not copying some other project. We're kind of building something new. And so we built our proof of concept. Um, you mentioned you kinda came in right in the heart of some of that, the engineering and right of way. What's some of your takeaways of that project? Like, what were the challenges? What are you proud about? You know? What do you think about, the work we did in Folsom?
I mean, challenges, you know, from a design aspect, I mean, I felt like the engineering was relatively simple, right? We're
It
talking
is.
about a 4 lane,
It's
yeah,
totally simple.
expressway. Yeah. And part of it was off alignment. So, the engineering part, yeah, there's some drainage challenges, things like that. The thing that's always, difficult is it's the utilities and the right of way,
Yeah,
right? Trying to acquire that, trying to nail down exactly what the project footprint's going to be and how much you need, and then working to get it from the property owners.
right,
It's always a long process. And then, you recall like SMUD, that was a huge utility
right.
relocation, multi-million-dollar relocation along that corridor. And so being able to work with them on where I mean, they wanted their own utility easement, right? They never want to relocate again. And I understand where SMUD's coming from because those are huge metal poles,
Yeah.
right? And
Two-wheeler steel.
yeah,
Two-wheeler
tubular
steel.
steel.
Alright.
And so trying to work with them to get those placed in an ultimate location and then working out, you know, what the cost was going to be.
Yeah.
It was huge. So,
Yeah, temporary grading down to the foundation, things like that.
yeah.
You know, it's so funny you said that the engineering was simple because I have joked about that forever. I mean, this road is straight and flat, like, come on. You could 50 years ago, we would have built it with a cross section
Right.
and an alignment. The fact that our plan sheets or our plan sets are, 300 pages is a function of, you know, regulatory things on water quality and traffic handling and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Highway 50 going up to Tahoe was probably built with like a plan set that was like maybe 50 pages. You know what I mean? They just had a surveyor out there in a cross section. Yeah, I don't think the Capital Southeast Connector is hard engineering at all. Now there are some things that I thought are nuanced, about like the radio towers. I mean, who's ever dealt with radio towers, right?
Yeah.
It's towers that go up 1,000 feet in the air. I can see them practically from my house.
Right.
These radio towers. So that's kind of some of the unique things. But I'm trying to think about Folsom. Folsom. Folsom to me has always just been so easy to work with. I mean, just a great city, great leadership. Shout out to Brian Reed, who was just a star. Really loved working with him and helped us so much with that project. And, I think when you've got a city, especially a city like Folsom that's been around for hundreds of years, I mean, 150 years or whatever it is, I mean, they're an old city. They know what they're doing. And they have this development. They integrated our project into their development. It all seemed to be pretty smooth. And the landowners there, the developers and landowners were very accommodating and great to work with. I don't really much.
I gotta hand it to Brian and, like, the CM team, Saliber,
Yeah.
because during construction, I mean, you saw how things were changing in the plan area daily.
Yeah.
There were changes, right? And so there had to be modifications to our design along the way that had to be done, quickly
Right.
to match up with what was going on out there. And I think, overall, the project turned out great, right? You could stare at it with anything, you could stare at it long enough and nitpick here and there, but um, it's built. We've gotten great feedback from the public, and like you said, there was good coordination between the city and the landowners and the developments during construction. I think that kind of speaks volumes to the long-term planning that really went into this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff before my time here that was done with those developments. You were heavily involved with setting right away, and all these different coordination issues, and that really, the rubber started to hit the road with construction, right?
Yeah.
So, um,
What's interesting is very early on, the city made a decision to push the alignment south, right, and kind of do it off alignment to the south to maximize the the land in Folsom because it's such a high value, and south of White Rock is unincorporated. And at first, that was I didn't quite understand the decision, and it kind of increased the right of way that we had to purchase to the south. But then guess what? In construction, it worked out perfectly because we built the whole thing off alignment,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the road was open the entire time, and we could expedite the mass grading and the paving. Here's my big regret about the work we did in Folsom is that we didn't go all the way up the hill. And there's only one reason why. Is we didn't have the funding, right? And the project's environmentally approved. It's permitted. The utilities are all worked out, right? I mean, there's no challenge with the right of way on the south either. It's major landowners who are easy to work with and acquire land from. We could have kept going. And I think this is my great frustration with yeah, California and the region is that like, man, when you've got a project like this that is just has so much momentum, so much inertia, and the only thing stopping us is not having sufficient capital to just keep going. Um, that was my big regret. We could have completed that project, you know?
You asked about challenges earlier, and that's, the design, the right of way, all that kind of stuff. Those are, they have their own challenges, but to me, the major challenge, right, and with any big infrastructure project is how you fund it,
Mm,
right? And that's one thing I think the public doesn't really understand. Um, there's like you could take a whole class on how, transportation infrastructure is funded in this state, and
for 6 months.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe a semester-long class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's trying to cobble together the funding is just huge challenge. Like you said, if we just had a little bit more, we could have went up the hill, but it was hard to scrape together just enough to do the 2.5 miles that we did.
Right.
That took years to cobble that together. We didn't just get one big lump sum.
No.
So
And then we had to, like, remove the bike trail, and then we saved some money, so we were able to add it back in, but then there was, like, a constraint on the funding on the bike trail. They're like, "Oh, we don't wanna give it to you." I'm like, "This thing is literally mass graded. This is the cheapest bike trail you'll ever get.
right.
Like, what are you talking about?" So that was a source of frustration, yeah. But yeah, oh my gosh, meanwhile, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent in other places and other priorities. And you know, yes, transportation funding is extremely complicated, but ultimately, if it's a priority and there's a will, there will be a way. And I think so much of what, we have to do, I have to do is find that those champions, right? People that um, are politically savvy and will go help us champion the project and get us the money.
Yeah.
Public money comes from public officials, right? You got to play that game. So, we've had some success on Grantline. Let's transition over to Grantline because, let's talk about what's active right now on Grantline. What are we doing there?
It's a, 3.5 mile segment roughly going from the White Rock Road intersection. And that's a 4-lane improvement that the county constructed back in 2014, 2015, right? So it's tying off of there and continuing those improvements down to Chrysanthi Boulevard and that whole stretch. There's a ton of development,
Yeah.
right? There's heavy industrial use with Teichert's aggregate plant there. So a lot of mixed land use. Corridors heavily used.
Yeah.
There's safety issues. So we're really working to address that to get traffic through there quicker and address those safety issues. That's really the major one of the major components of this project, in addition to building out the connector. It's
Well, and similar story is that my goodness, if you give us the money, we'll put it to use. The whole project is environmentally approved all the way down to Jackson, right? State Route 16. That's 7.5 miles of a complex environmental assessment approved at the highest levels of the state through headquarters
yeah.
and federal highways, right? And we have permits 404, 401, I mean, they're there. And so the fact that, we're looking at a halfway point at Chrysanthi is the exact same situation we have in Folsom where we stopped halfway at East Bidwell. What's stopping us from going all the way to Jackson? Funding. Give us
Yeah.
the funding. We'll do it. I mean, and we have a contracts in place. And so, hey, we'll make it work.
There's always,
We'll make it work.
there's always something unique, along the alignment, and stopping short at Chrysanthi is, it's really, I don't know the word for it, but you know, there's so many more things we could address, right? Like we have the Kiefer landfill, it's the regional landfill. If we can go a little bit further, we could address, the entry to that and access to that. You have the Jackson Grant Line Road intersection, one of the busiest intersections that,
Right.
really, really needs to be improved.
Right.
So, the big thing is trying to, with these different funding agencies is get them to understand really the value of the project, because we go in and we apply for whether it's 2 miles or 3 miles and we get some funding for it. And they look at it, the project kind of through that lens of, oh, you're just improving 2 miles. But ultimately, what's the value of the connector to the region? And it's huge, and then people don't really understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as soon as they spend about 1 minute thinking about it, they get it. Anyone who's been out there, anyone who's lived here
Yep.
knows that. And so it's really just a matter of, you know, finding that champion, finding the awareness, and what we have that's different for me, certainly, and for our agency on Grantline is that we have a new city that we're dealing with. We're dealing with Rancho Cordova. And even back in my earlier days of consulting work and doing engineering, I never worked for Rancho Cordova. I did a ton of work with El Dorado County, work with Folsom. I did a ton of work in Elk Grove, Sac County.
Rancho was a fairly new city, right? They're
Mhm.
getting their feet under them. They didn't have a lot of big projects going on.
Yeah,
But, since that time, you look at, all the growth and developments that's happened in Rancho, and they've completed a lot of big projects. There's the whole Folsom Boulevard, right? Restoration project, a lot of work going on Sunrise, the interchange,
yeah,
right? So there's a lot of stuff that's been happening in the city now.
for sure. Yeah, and and in the reality of our project when it comes to Rancho is that it's a little at the back end of the city. For the most part, ranchos, like you said, they're along Folsom Boulevard, they're along Highway 50, and this is kind of like in the new area, right? This is kind of the new area. And, I can understand that the city's priorities, they want that to be around their namesake, right? The Rancho Cordova Parkway, right?
Mhm.
Like, and that makes total sense. They have their economic development. They want to, Folsom Boulevard. That's really the heart of their city. So, but talk about, the implementation. When I say implementation phase, I'm kind of describing like handing a project over to be constructed. Kind of walk people through like what does that really mean, right? Because we're a design and delivery
Yeah.
entity, right?
Yeah. So the implementation of the project you're talking about was, we really get this, get everything teed up, construction documents, prepared, that can be bid on, put out to bid by a contractor.
Permits.
We secure all the permitting, all the mitigation, right? We pay for that. Securing the right of way, right? And there's a lot of steps to get to that construction phase. I think that, people don't really see or understand, especially when there's federal funding involved.
Oh,
You have to
mm,
certify the right of way. You
yeah.
have to, certify your PS&E, your design package, right?
Yeah.
All that stuff goes to Caltrans to check off the boxes. Um, and you know, you have to get construction authorization, right? The ability to unlock that federal funding and be able to utilize it on a project. And then it has to go out, it will go out to our member agencies to bid,
Yeah.
get construction bids. So there's a lot that goes into preparing that package and being able to pass it off to a member agency to implement construction.
Yeah, one thing I have to tell folks who are kind of new to this is that we actually don't have the money, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
given to us, right? Uncle Sam has deep pockets but short arms, And so, what we get is paperwork, and, we get the approval to spend our money, and then they will reimburse us
Right.
after we spend it, right? And so, what we have is, like, programmed dollars, and those dollars sit in a spreadsheet, they sit in a in paperwork, but they don't sit in our account. Like,
Right.
we're not making any interest on this, right? And so you're seeing some of the federal government efficiency stuff that you're seeing, right, is like all this, Doge stuff, the efficiency, they're canceling contracts. Yeah, it's easy to do because you're just canceling paperwork. Like, you
Yeah.
don't have to take anyone's money away.
You know, you hear, well, the project was awarded $20 million.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we got a $20 million check,
No.
or you got to go through all the hoops to be able to unlock the ability to get reimbursed,
Yeah.
up to $20 million.
Too.
That's what
Right.
it is.
So, but yeah, I mean, look, the funding thing, so much is changing right now. I mean,
Yeah.
federal level, some of it's exciting, and I'm almost kinda like eating popcorn, like, what's gonna happen next? Right? It doesn't seem like, Doge has come to DOT yet, but I think it's coming. I think it's only a matter of time, and, but to get the federal funding, oh my goodness, I mean, it's a multi-year effort and strategy. You have to be smart about it. Nobody just hands out money. And so, we have been, I think, fortunate um, to capture a lot of federal funds, not just discretionary grants, but also what we call congressionally directed spending. Right.
Mhm.
So one of the things I I think it's a great thing for our project is that after redistricting, now we have 3 congressional members, right? So we have Congresswoman Matsui, Congressman Barra, and Congressman Kiley, and they all kind of represent their own city. Like Kiley represents Folsom, Barra represents Rancho Cordova, Matsui represents Elk Grove,
Yeah.
and we have 3 county supervisors, right? We have Rosario Rodriguez, who represents Folsom. And then we have Pat Hume, who represents, and Rich Desmond that represent um, Rancho Cordova and El Grove. And so, if I'm thinking in my mind about like the falling dominoes, right, and how like dominoes need to fall in order for that federal domino to pass.
Well, yeah, you spend a lot of your time in that world and the outreach with a lot of the politicals and, the electeds, trying to go find money. I mean, talk a little bit about that process, right? How do you work up to getting some of these big federal grants
Sure.
that we've received?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I start with is, like, conviction, right? Have the courage of your conviction to say, like, "This is a good project, and it's smartly planned, and I'm making a reasonable request," right? Like, I'm not going into a congressman office and saying, like, "What do I do?" Right? Like, I walk in and say, like, "I have a plan for you. I want you to help me execute this plan." And it's targeted to this location, and we're going to go to this program because we can demonstrate these benefits, right? It's very specific to that. And I think that, I mean, it's so obvious if you think about 34 miles, the whole context of the landscape changes, right? You're going from working ag land to ranch land. You're going from floodplain, literally river floodplain, to oak woodland foothills, right? So there isn't one program or category that's going to apply to that. And you have to be strategic in saying, what's going to work here? And how do I get this individual to be my champion? And people have different beliefs on, what they care about. And so, you got to put thought into that. You got to build personal relationships. For example, some of the congressional members have invited me to participate in their town halls. It's not something I really would like to do, but I'll go, right? I'm a staffer. People have questions about transportation, I'll answer them, right? But that's going to build a rapport,
Yeah.
right? So that the congressman is going to feel that they can trust me, right? And they can trust our agency that we can deliver. And I think that's what they like.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of we've had a lot of good events over the years, right? Especially for Folsom. And there's a lot of good photo ops and ability for, these electeds to get out and really share how they've helped to secure the funding and move this project along.
Yeah. In Elk Grove, we had, like, a confetti explosion, and I remember it was like, "Is that biodegradable?" Right? But, yeah, I mean, so that's part of how I think is, like, you know, it's not coming hat in hand.
Mhm.
It's, "Hey, first of all, this is the project. It's a great project. Do you support it? Yes, you do. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So then let's talk about how to be successful you want to be successful in winning money for your region. I want to be the recipient of that money, and let's do it together in a smart way. So, um, right now we have like pending millions of dollars sitting out there in congressionally directed spending through these budget bills. And, with the election, I was hoping that some of that would get resolved prior to November. It didn't. And now it's like March. And, I've been talking to our federal lobbyists like, isn't this money going to be real? Like, how do we get our real money here? But I am feeling optimistic that, that we'll be able to pull down a good chunk of change and put it to use immediately. But I'm more excited about the work we just did at the state. Talk about,
Yeah.
because you put a ton of work into this. Some of it at the very last minute, but that's neither here nor there. Now it got submitted.
It's a
Right?
team effort.
It's a team effort. He
Uh,
says it's a team effort.
yeah. That grant, we're keeping our fingers crossed, right? It's a $20 million request to help construct that Grant Line segment, and a lot went into there. We're leveraging, all the work that we've been doing, the previous funding that we received in the Cycle 3 TSEP, that is helping to fund the design, all right,
Right.
and as well as local funding through Measure A that we receive, funding from our member agencies as well.
Yeah.
So, that was a big lift to really show that, number one, we're far enough along in the design, and we will be able to, if we get awarded the funding, that's one of the big things, right? Is you have to be able to spend it within a certain time frame.
Right. Speak about though the performance measures. Like why did we target the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program? And we are looking at, essentially truck safety. And when we say truck, I'm not talking Silverado. This is not your Toyota
Right.
Tacoma, right?
This segment, like, it fits the program to a T, right? The whole the program is meant to increase freight capacity and throughput,
Mhm.
right? And improve safety. And here we got a corridor. I talked a little bit about it earlier. There's heavy industrial use with aggregate plants,
Right.
mining. And so we're talking, like you mentioned, big semi trucks, double trailers,
Right.
right? And it's not just coming from, uh, the plants, the aggregate plants that are there. It's trucks that are also passing through the region with all the construction going on in Rancho Cordova, Folsom, and Elk Grove. So it's just a mix of huge trucks that go through this corridor. We have some safety concerns as well that we'll be addressing. And so when you talk about performance metrics, right, being able to widen this road, fix the geometry is going to help these vehicles just get through more quickly.
This road is 60 years old. I mean, it might even be older.
Talking, yeah, no shoulders
Yeah.
and parts of it, 11-foot
Failing.
lanes,
Yeah.
right? So it is, I heard from residents, right, that we've gotten a lot of feedback, emails, letters, right, that
Right.
they're ready for it to be improved. It's a scary road to drive if you're commuting, bringing your kids to school.
Right. The questions I get the most is essentially, why is it taking so long? When's it going to be finished? And will it connect to I-80?
Right.
No, it won't. And nothing ever will. That ship has sailed. But yeah, I mean, the residents, anyone who's out there, anyone who travels this corridor, especially, but in Rancho Cordova, Anatolia, that whole area south, Sunrise, um, they want it improved now. They want, like, start tomorrow. And that's how urgent they feel the improvements are. And I agree. I don't want my kids out there driving around or whatever. It is so terrible, and it happens every single year. There's a fatality. I mean, it's insane, and,
I think it's also near and dear to Councilwoman, Pol Potty's your heart to improve this as well, right? She had a pretty bad accident along that exact stretch, so.
right. Yeah, so, I mean, I think that the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program is, I'm so grateful that we're even in it, cycle 3, feeling great about cycle 4. Truthfully, I mean, I'm like, "Dude, we wanna be in cycle 5." Like,
Yeah.
just keep going. I would love to go all the way down to Jackson and can just keep building on this. I would certainly go down to Kiefer. My goodness, the entrance to the landfill. So, I'm excited about that. I think that some of the environmental constraints out here are a little unique. A lot of vernal pools, which I have to I didn't even know what those were when I was, a young engineer. One of the things about this project that is actually now I love, believe it or not, is mitigation. I actually love it. You know? It's, like, so fun for me to work on mitigation, and be out there, but, big project like this with, what, $20 million in mitigation obligations, what's kinda been your thoughts on what we're doing with the open space and things like that?
It's tough because, mitigation costs a lot,
Yeah.
right? And the costs just keep going up.
Grass is expensive.
Yeah, the mitigated grass.
The Sacramento Valley grass. It's only available here.
And the laws, the rules, the regs are always changing, right? We have our, environmental consultant talking about how, what constitutes a water of the US,
Oh my
right?
god.
And it used to be like something that, if it flowed to some kind, vernal pool complex and eventually into some waterway, okay, that's a water of the US. Well, now it's like it could be a roadside ditch.
Yeah.
Right? So,
I think one of the most famous things I ever saw was when they mapped the waters of the US based on, like, the Obama interpretation of it, when, like, the entire state of Arizona was blue, right? Like, it looked like Arizona looked like Minnesota, right, with, like, lakes everywhere. But yeah, what do they call it? A thermal drainage now, right? Like, it's only wet when it rains. I was like,
right,
"You mean like my rain gutter?
right.
Like, what are you talking about?" Like like, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I think it is definitely nuts, the definition of waters of the United States or navigable waters,
Yeah.
like, okay, there's no boats on our roadside ditches, okay, get real. But here we are again, and, this is, I just saw there's an email yesterday about WOTUS, right? And it all just comes down to Congress needs to pass a law that defines what a water of the United States is.
Yeah.
It needs to be in law. It needs to be codified. And until it is, every 4 or 8 years, there will be a new definition, right? Because who defines it? The regulatory agencies. If Congress isn't going to define it, EPA will,
Yeah.
Army Corps will, right? And every 4 years is a new definition. It's insane. I don't remember the number, but was it like, I don't maybe it was 300,000, but was it 700,000 we paid in the Folsom White Rock mitigation for those ditches? I mean, it was
Yeah.
a
I
number.
think ultimately the mitigation cost for that segment was close to $1 million.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. Right.
But
So
this
insane.
is, yeah, I mean, we talk about regulation, really, bringing things to a crawl, development to a crawl, infrastructure to a crawl. This is it, right? Part of it is the environmental. Like you said, there really has to be clear rules on, definitions on what these things are. And, I feel like we're very environmentally conscious. We're not out there trying to do things to ruin the environment. There's a lot of things in place from an air quality standpoint, from, natural resources standpoint that, we mitigate all that. Um, and then, there's a whole other discussion, but the VMT discussion, the VMT mitigation, right, that
God.
California is starting to bring into the picture.
Yeah,
Right? These things are starting to make it, you know, uh, very difficult from a cost standpoint to even build projects.
sure. Yeah, and that's not gonna change, yeah. Yeah, I definitely remember having rock-lined roadside ditches get qualified as waters under the California Clean Water Act. That's the other thing, right? Is you have a federal Clean Water Act, right? But then California says, "Oh, it's not stringent enough.
Yeah.
We need to have our own California Clean Water Act," and you're just watching money fly out the door. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, you have to pay the bill if you're going to build something.
Right.
You can't even dispute it. There's really no mechanism. Once it's mapped and determined, the bill's yours.
Yeah.
And then they'll watch you very closely to make sure you comply with that permit, which is, whatever. Um, yeah, but in general, we're not going through a forest or, there's no real environmentally sensitive areas that, I understand that need to be a little ambiguous. But we are talking about an area of the county that includes the landfill,
Yeah.
right? So, this probably isn't the most pristine environmental area here. This is where we're putting our trash. Okay, so not to be too snarky about it, but I actually do like. I love the open space that we do, and I think that it actually provides me a good little break from the road building and the engineering. Is to say, actually, it's more than that. We need to be a steward of our environmental efforts here, and we need to not just write a check. We need to say, "Hey, we're going to take care of this land and make sure that it's improved and that its benefits are improved for future generations." I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Y-
I mean, part of our mitigation, right, is creating wildlife crossings, continuity, right,
mhm.
between habitats. So we're coming in, we're filling, putting some fill in, putting some pavement in. Well, if there was some continuity between habitat, we're coming in, we're putting in, large culverts to allow for the passage of wildlife.
That's such a great point. I mean, and we were chatting a little bit about Highway 50 earlier. 50 years ago, it's just blade and grade. And what's if you're going through a ravine, what do you need? A 30-inch culvert? Boom, right? That's all they put in
Yeah.
there. Today, I mean, we're doing this design to make sure that like there's sunlight coming through and open looks so that animals can cross, right? The continuity of these corridors. It's like a science, and it's way different than just filling in areas and putting in a culvert. I mean, it's over engineered for to water,
Right.
right? To cross
Yeah. It's not
water.
for
It's
capacity,
not
it's
how
for drainage.
right, it's
Yeah.
not a drainage thing anymore, right? It's for deer and coyotes and, other critters, really.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and, that's actually a very good point because we don't quantify that in our mitigation. Like, we don't assign a dollar value to that.
Right.
It's just part of our project costs. It would be really interesting someday to see, like, how much did we really do for this?
The Alder Creek Bridge.
Right,
That's a huge, you go over there, that's a huge bridge, huge
right,
opening.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The cost of that's definitely for the environment. That could have been a culvert. 50 years ago, it would have been a culvert.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was literally one that we reconstructed, right? On the existing road, it
Right.
was a culvert.
Yep.
Let's talk about, you coming here to the JPA and how you got started here. You and I used to work together when it was Dewberry, Drake Haglin, but, we didn't work that closely together. It was, you were kind of doing your thing and I was here at the JPA. I definitely remember you reaching out, being interested in the project, and we'd meet and have lunch. But what was some of the reasons, or what kind of inspired you to come here and work on this project?
Well, prior to coming here to the JPA, I spent, my whole career in the consulting world. And I was working on a lot of, small projects here and there that were down further in the valley or up north, Yuba County type stuff, Placer County, a lot of stuff that was out of the Sacramento region. And, it's cool. It gets built and you get to drive up, you get to go see it, snap some pictures, right? But it's never anything that it's where you live that you drive on that you can show people, hey, I did this, I was a part of this project. Um, so I want to say it was back in 2017 timeframe. I was working at a consulting firm and really kind of just looking for a change. I think my son was around 1 year old. Um, and really just kind of looking for a change. I wanted to do things that were more local.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, it was funny. I was on vacation. We were going through the airport and turned my phone back on. And, all the text messages, all the ding, 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 voicemails, text messages start
Yeah.
coming through. And it was just happened to be a text message from you that I hadn't seen in a while. We worked at Drake Haglin. And, during my time there, you were spending your time here at the JPA. And, yeah, I had an interest in working on the connector. It just wasn't, you know, from a workload standpoint and need there wasn't the ability for me to start shifting over to the connector. So anyway, fast forward to 2017, and then I'm going through the airport, and I'm like, "Yeah, I got this text from Derek." I'm telling my wife, "I haven't talked to him in a while." And so, you kinda asking what my interest would be to be over here at the JPA, and,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I was just like, "This is a project that's been going on for quite some time." It's literally kinda in my backyard, right? In the region that I live in, it's the biggest, I'd call it a mega project,
Mm.
right? And there aren't many of those around here.
Yeah.
So it's something as an engineer, you wanna be able to work on a mega project, right?
Totally.
So
Yep.
there were a lot of different reasons. I believe in the project. I think it's really needed
Mhm.
for the region, from a professional standpoint, right? And from a personal standpoint, to be able to say I worked on this project and be able to see it built and drive on it.
Yeah.
So those are really the driving factors. And I was like, yeah, I want to get over here to the JPA and start working on this.
Cool. Yeah, my story's a little similar. It's a little similar. I've always wanted to focus more on the projects that are local, and absolutely, you want to work on big projects. I mean, that's kind of the nature of nobody went to school to work on a parking lot. That's not what inspired you to become a civil engineer, right? You go to see the Golden Gate Bridge, right? You want and stuff like that, and yeah, I mean, my career, uh, I started engineering interning when I was like 18 or 19. I mean, I was doing stuff up in Citrus Heights and Plan Check. And I remember walking into I had worked there for like 9 months and a little Plan Check development firm. And I asked for a raise. Hey, Suzanne, her name was Suzanne. Suzanne, can I have a raise? And she's like, nope. And I was like, I quit. Right? It was just like probably the one time in my life I, like, just, like, instantly quit. But showing how good the market was, I, like, went to school at Sac State, and, like, the very next day, I had a job, right? And my job was on La Riviera Drive and Folsom Boulevard. Like, it was so much closer than Citrus Heights.
Mhm.
And for me, being, like, literally 19 years old, that was everything. I was like, "Oh, I don't have to commute 20 minutes up to Citrus Heights." And I was living on La Riviera. And so to have I worked for a transportation firm. It was light rail, and I did some work in the Bay Area, San Jose, but our office was here in Sacramento. And when I graduated, I was like, "Hey, I graduated, and time for full time work." And I truly love these people. They're fantastic people. They said to me, Derek, this is not really the right place for you. You should go to a big design firm, right? You need to get design experience. And that was the best advice. It really was. You come out of school, you're not a professional. You're not licensed. You have to work under a team of licensed engineers. And so the advice that they gave me, they said, go find another job. Like, go find another job here locally, and we'll provide you a reference, but you need to get design experience. And so after I graduated from Sac State, I spent, probably close to 12 years at a design firm. And same thing, started off very small projects, like very small projects. And as your career progresses, you want to do more and more. And the Capital Southeast Connector was in its infancy. I mean, JPA didn't exist, right, when I was in college and graduating. So it wasn't, until, I don't know, late 2000s that I started to pay attention to the connector project. And the former executive director, great guy, I met with him and said, "If I'm gonna leave my firm and come work for you, I need to know that this is gonna be a good place for me, and we need to have a good relationship. Like, it has to, I was an owner in that
Yeah.
firm. Like, I was an owner, so I had to divest myself and then come here. But and my wife was pregnant at that time too. Like, we have 3 kids, and, like, every time we have a kid, there's, like, some major thing going on. But for me, it was always like, yes, I want to work on a project that's right here. And I had some of that. I'd been doing a lot of it. I'd worked on the connector as a consultant, and I had been doing work in El Dorado and Elk Grove, and so it was very natural for me to come over to the JPA because I had project experience along the corridor. And and in my consulting world, I was tasked with a fair amount of business development work and marketing and things like that. And I was like, they would be like, "Hey, Derek, go win work like in Stanislaus County." Right? I'm like, okay, you're driving for hours. So,
Yeah.
you're driving for hours to go have lunch in
Right.
Modesto, right? Like, okay, Modesto, fine. Right. But like, there's no real great food there. You're gonna go have lunch with a bunch of engineers and drive for hours to do that.
Tough to build relationships.
Yeah.
And you're going 2 hours away.
Right. In a county we'd never wanna work in.
Yeah.
And very similar with San Joaquin County, where it was like, "Hey, we haven't won work here in 10 years, and I gotta go down and win work in San Joaquin County." And so to have the opportunity to, you know, work here, know a project, and kinda get into it, that really appealed to me, and it made sense. And I say to people, I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know what I was getting into. Right? And that's when you really start to learn what it takes to do a project like this. And it's not the engineering.
Yeah.
It's not that at all. It is so complicated. The politics, the funding, the public outreach. I mean, my gosh, the amount of public engagement and outreach that we have had to do, uh, it's that's a whole nother podcast.
It's huge. Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. It was Between Two Shovels, Derek Minnema and Matt Lampa here at the Connector JPA. We'll do more of these. This was our first one. We're just kind of testing it out. But if you want to see more, like, subscribe, do all of those things. Follow us on all those platforms, LinkedIn. Our website is connectorjpa.com. We've got a YouTube channel. We've got all the socials. So check us out and follow along for more.